Not every cave lets you leave. 4 divers thought they knew the risks. They didn't. Deep below, in twisting, collapsing tunnels, the currents turned violent, crushing their way out and sealing them inside. This is the story of a dive that started as an adventure and spiraled into a merciless fight for survival, where every moment dragged them closer to the dark unknown. This video contains graphic and intense content. Viewer discretion is advised. The date was November 24th, 2019, and the location was Manatee Springs State Park. It was a calm November day when 4 divers from China prepared for an ambitious exploration at Florida's Manatee Springs State Park. They were no strangers to the thrill of diving. Each was certified and experienced to varying degrees. But today they'd be splitting up to tackle one of the most challenging and unforgiving environments that nature had to offer: the deep, twisting caverns beneath Manatee Springs. The team divided themselves into 2 groups. The first was led by Wang, an instructor who had more than 500 hours of underwater experience under his belt. His partner, Chen, while less seasoned, had over 100 hours of logged dives, which made him competent but still cautious. Group 2 was a different story. Min and Fu Shu, each with only 11 hours of experience, were new to cave diving, and it was their first time navigating such a complex system of caves. They had trained rigorously for the basics, but these caverns demanded more than skill. They demanded respect and an understanding that one wrong turn could mean the difference between life and death. What they didn't know is that Manatee Springs had changed dramatically since Wang's last visit years ago. Heavy rains had swept through the region, reshaping tunnels and intensifying currents. In fact, several passages had collapsed entirely, trapping divers in the recent past and creating perilous traps of silt and unseen crevices. Signs around the site warned experienced divers to avoid certain areas, but Wang, confident in his prior experience, hadn't reviewed the latest updates about these hazards. They faced a critical choice before even entering the water: which entry point to take. There were 2 main options. The first was the primary entrance at Manatee Springs itself. Known for its breathtaking beauty, this entrance showcased bubbling water on the surface, an indication of the powerful currents lurking below. For a diver, the sight of those bubbles usually meant one thing: strong, relentless water pressure that could quickly pull anyone off course. The other option was a site known to locals as the Catfish Hotel. It was less dramatic, coated in a thick layer of duckweed that blanketed the surface in a quiet green. Beneath that cover, however, the water was clearer, with a mild current and a sense of calm that bellied the unknown dangers waiting below. This spot was favored by divers looking to avoid the challenging turbulence of Manatee Springs, but it also held its own challenges, like narrow, jagged entryways and silt-covered passages that could cloud visibility with a single misplaced fin stroke. Wang and Chen decided to go in first for the initial dive and had chosen Catfish Hotel as their entry point, the safer, calmer choice, or so they thought. Despite the risks, they came prepared with advanced equipment to face the depths. They submerged and began their descent, their lights piercing the murky darkness as they glided deeper into the cave system. Soon they reached Friedman's Sink, one of the deepest points in the area, some 1,600 feet down. It took just over 35 minutes to reach this haunting depth, where visibility was less than ideal. Not great, but not too bad, Wang later commented to Min and Fu when they returned from the initial dive. Upon returning, they regrouped with Min and Fu at the surface, who had been anxiously waiting for their signal. With a nod, the 4 divers formed a single unit and prepared for their journey deeper into the complex cave. The plan was straightforward: to explore the network of underwater tunnels, navigate through its passages, and emerge with tales of the unknown. They checked their oxygen levels one last time, each diver's eyes meeting the others with a shared sense of purpose. But barely 500 feet from their exit, everything changed. Almost without warning, the currents that had been relatively tame began to surge, pushing them with a force that was beyond anything Wang had anticipated. Recent rains had overloaded the aquifer, releasing torrents of water that now flooded furiously through the cave's narrow passages, converting a routine dive into a deadly struggle against nature itself. Rocks and debris swirled in the darkness, scraping against their suits, as the current grew so powerful that it shook the very walls of the cave. Visibility rapidly deteriorated, sinking from murky shadows to complete blackness in seconds. Chen felt his breathing grow faster as panic flickered at the edges of his mind. There was no longer any way to see beyond the few inches directly in front of his face. And then it got worse. The tremors in the cave intensified, and a deep, thunderous rumble symboled that sections of the tunnel walls were collapsing around them. Passages they had used just moments ago were now blocked, sealing off potential escape routes and leaving them trapped in a stone cocoon, choked by debris and darkness. In the midst of this chaos, Wang struggled to keep his bearings, but the current was unrelenting. In a sudden, violent surge, he was slammed against a jagged rock wall, the impact breaking his rebreather in half. He felt the unmistakable taste of stale, unusable air fill his lungs. His chest tightened as he tried to draw breath, only to find himself choking. He clutched his neck, desperate to force air back into his lungs, while his broken equipment dangled uselessly in the torrent. Just as Wang fought for breath, Chen was suddenly ripped from the group. The current dragged him toward a large, yawning hole in the rock, a black void that seemed to open up from nowhere. Min and Fu, now only feet away from him, frantically tried to reach out, but the water was too powerful, holding them back as if they were chained in place. They could only watch, helpless, as Chen disappeared into the darkness, swallowed whole by the unseen depths. Panicked and determined, Min and Fu tried signaling Wang, flashing their lights in an attempt to rescue him, to tell him that they were going back up to find help. But the beams barely pierced the murky water, the signals swallowed by the chaos swirling around them. As Fu and Min tried to escape, they were hit hard by a strong current, swimming blindly in every direction. Chen had been pulled into a large hole and struggled to get out. Meanwhile, Wang, choking and gasping, was trying to regain control of his breath. The current finally loosened a bit, and Wang caught sight of Chen. He swam over and tried to pull him out, but it was impossible, so he had to let him go. As soon as he did, the current started working in Wang's favor, pushing him up. The rush of water carried him to the surface, where he could finally take a breath. He was safe. With the current now moving upward, Chen was propelled out of the cave, followed by Fu. Unfortunately, just as Min tried to join them outside, a sudden surge dragged her into a nearby cavern, pinning her against the wall. The grip of the current was unyielding, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't break free. Alone and scared, she tried repeatedly to pull herself out of the hole, growing weaker with every attempt. Each time she seemed close to escaping, the rushing water pushed her back into the hole. Then things took a turn for the worse. Rocks and debris started piling into the hole, trapping her limbs, making it nearly impossible to move. Worse yet, her oxygen levels were dropping fast, especially as she began to panic. Fu, realizing Min hadn't surfaced, ran to the park's duty station to get help. Chen, badly injured, could do little more than lie on the platform outside the cave, waiting for first responders. Wang, knowing Min was in serious trouble, drove back to the springs without waiting for assistance, but the violent current was too much, pushing him back with every attempt, and after several tries, he had no choice but to give up, hoping that help would come soon. The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. An ambulance arrived about 20 minutes later, pulling Chen from the platform and rushing him to the nearest hospital for immediate treatment. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was barely one, the rescue team arrived. Equipped with specialized tools and an arsenal of experience, they made their first attempt to dive into the cave. but even the professionals found themselves at the mercy of the vicious current. They pushed forward as far as they could, but the conditions were near impossible. Each attempt was met with the same insurmountable force, the dark water clawing at them, sending rocks and silt swirling through their vision, rendering the path ahead completely blind. One by one, each attempt was met with failure, the team resurfacing with expressions that grew grimmer with every dive. The walls of the cave were crumbling, barricading potential routes, and visibility had fallen to zero. They were running out of time and options. Inside the cave, the reality of Min's fate was far darker than anyone above could have imagined. As her oxygen supply dwindled, Min felt the first waves of panic giving way to a strange, haunting calm. She knew she was out of options. She could feel it in her chest, each shallow breath, a reminder that she was inhaling precious seconds. She took one final, ragged inhale before the inevitable happened. Her tank ran dry, and she found herself gasping on instinct, pulling water into her lungs. The last thing she saw was the dark, silent rock encasing her, and in that terrible stillness, the cave claimed her. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this.